All right. Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about our animation 12 principles of squash and stretch, and timing is what we're going to work on. Squash and stretch is the sense of weight and flexibility of an object to give it mass, whether it's really solid or very flexible. We can also use it to accentuate speed. So we're going to do that. And then we're also going to be talking about timing today as it applies to animation. Timing refers to the number of frames given to an action, and we can change the speed of it, make it look like going really fast or really slow by the number of frames we use in any certain animation block. So we're going to jump over here to animate here. And I've got a ball here, okay? So I'm going to just show you here. So I've got a ball and I've animated it down to about 10, 12 frames here, where it's going to hit the ground and come back up. Okay. So this is an example of squash and stretch here. So as it comes down, it hits the ground and squashes. So it's kind of what we think of, right? Now, one thing I want to point out is when we distort the ball, if we make it slim, we also need to stretch it vertically. If we squash it down, we also need to stretch it horizontally so it takes up the same amount of space. So we got that going on here, and it's looking pretty good here. I'm going to back up here just a second and show you how I made this ball with just the shapes tool. But you can see this looks pretty good. And if I go and I say I want to loop this and play this, drag this out up to here. See, it looks pretty good here. Okay, so let's back up here just a second. Let me get to the first frame here and we'll just make it. Now I've made this ball and I turned it into a library item right here by turning it into a symbol here. Okay, when I made this ball, I simply drew out a circle, hold down my, turn the stroke off on this guy here. Oh, we did mean to do that. Now, unlike other programs in Adobe, you can select like part of this item. You can see as I drag my box over here, if I go and just change something like this, it's not going to change the whole part. Like if I go and say I want no stroke on it, it's just going to take off the stroke there. I need to make sure you select all of that item when you're doing that. So if I want to change the color, make sure I select the whole thing, and let's make a green ball here. Okay, now this shadow I put on here by just grabbing half of this, grab that fill, and I'm just going to grab a darker fill, and then you can see when I come here I can actually bend that so that I can make kind of a curve here, and we're going to grab here and we're going to make one more. We're going to draw a highlight on our ball here like this, put maybe a couple there like that. Then I'm going to take the whole darn thing, select it all up here, and I've got it. I'm going to rotate it a little bit with my transform tool, something like that. So that's the ball we got right there, and that's what we got. Okay, now after I make that, because if I try to move it, it'll pull parts of it apart. I kind of want to keep it all together, so I'm going to turn it into an object. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to go up here and say modify and convert to symbol. Okay, let's just call this GB for green ball. And we say OK, and we've got that, and then it'll show up in our library when we click on it over here. Okay, so now I've got GB as my green ball. Okay, so that's how I made that. Now as I made this here, all I did was take, and I will make sure I can see all of my thing. I'm going to select my image here, and I'm going to, on my first frame, I'll hit F6. Actually, no. So I'm going to go in here and we'll just do this on a new layer here. Let's make a new layer. This way we can kind of take this here. We'll delete that there. On my new layer, I'll go to my library. We'll grab that green ball. We can just drag it on here. Put it kind of right here. Make it a little bit smaller here. And you can see now it's a symbol. It's grabbing the whole thing without pulling it apart. All right. So I'm going to grab my thing. I'm on my layer, first frame, and I'm going to say F6. It's going to make a new frame, and I'm going to pull that down. You can see that kind of onion skin for a second when you move it, but I want to keep that on there so I can kind of move it down in a consistent spot. Now I'm going to say F6 again. I'll move it down, F6, move it down, F6, move it down, F6, move it down until I get down there, and I'll bounce it back up. So that's how I'm doing that here for this ball over here. Okay, so I'm going to take this here and I'm going to go ahead and delete that just to throw that whole thing in the thing. So we'll just deal with the one I've got, but that's how I made this, and that's the action we're going to use for all of these, F6 until we get down. Okay, now after I get all the way down, to distort my ball as it hits the ground, I'm just going to use my transform tool. Okay, so again, as I squash it, I pull it apart. Okay, so but I don't want to just squash it as it hits the ground. Okay, it squashes right there as it starts, and so from there to there you can see it squashes up and down. Okay, now the one right before it though, we want to stretch it out a little bit here. So if I turn on my onion skin again, I'm going to pull this just like this. I want the ball to start to stretch out as it comes down, and that will help accentuate the speed. So I'm going to take and I'm going to squish it in just a little bit here, and I'll stretch it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go to the previous one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull this onion skin one frame so I can see that. So from here to here. So this one now, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stretch it out just a little bit, and I'm going to squeeze it just a little bit. And now, when we play it back, not only do we have that impact of it hitting the ground, of it squishing out, we start to stretch out, and then it bounces back up. Now we're going to do the same thing after it comes back up. We're going to stretch it out again, going here, and we're going to stretch it as it comes back up to help accentuate that movement as well. Turn on my onion skinning here. I'm going to go to my next frame, grab it again, and I'm going to match it just a little bit less because we're forming back to the ball this time. And I'm using my comma and my period key to kind of help morph this a little bit. Let's do one more frame up here like this. Okay. And then we will turn off my onion skinning, and let's see how that looks. And you can see it kind of helps accentuate that movement, that it comes down and goes back up, and it helps make that movement a little bit more pronounced. Okay, so if we loop this, boink, boink, boink. So we got some squash and stretch going, okay? So that's working. So now let's talk about the timing a little bit, okay? Now it's kind of mechanical because it moves at the same speed. It's very constant as it goes down and everything. But as balls would go down, it would go down, hit the ground, and would come back up, and gravity would hold it for a second and slow it down and then come back down at a little slower speed. So let's kind of let's just space it out. Okay, let's go to the first frame here. And we're just going to add a blank frame between each of them, and this would be kind of like animating on the twos where we'd animate every other frame. Okay, so if you want to add and stretch this out and make this happen a little longer, I would just go to the first frame. I'm going to hit F5. It's going to insert a new frame right there. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to go to the next frame, hit F5. I'm going to do that all the way down. And then we're going to look at the timing of this and see how it feels a little bit different. Okay. Now you can see as I'm adding these frames, it's also elongating the action of the entire timeline here, right? So every time we add a frame, we're adding 1 frame of time to our rate, and we're doing 12 frames per second on this one here. Get all the way to the end. Just a little bit here so you can see. And then we'll go here. Okay. Now let's take our loop meter here. We'll go all the way up here. Now let's watch it again. And you can see it slows it down a little bit. Okay. So in that way we can control the timing of how we're doing this. Okay. So let's say I want to go here, and at that beginning here, I want it to hang a little bit in the air before it begins to drop down again. Okay. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to hit F5 a couple more times. On the next frame, I'll add one more frame. So I've got 3 frames, 2 frames, 1 frame. When I get down here to the end, up here, I'm going to add a couple frames up here as well for it to hang up there in the air just a second as it goes up. I'm going to grab my timeline out, and I'm going to play it right like that and see how that feels. Okay. Now you can see I've got my motion is controlled a little bit where it hangs up in there just a fraction of a second before it begins to fall back down at a constant speed. Okay. Now this is very simplified. This kind of gives you an idea how we can control. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause, and we're going to move on from there.